In the snow-buried villages of northern China, where even breath turns to frost, the sound of hammer on iron still echoes like a heartbeat of the earth. At -20 degrees, when metal grows brittle and the wind cuts through clay walls, the blacksmith keeps his forge alive, not just to shape tools, but to shape himself. In the cruel winter of the medieval world, he became the man who made iron tremble before his will. Northern China was a land of endurance. In provinces like Hebei, Shaanxi, and Manchuria, winter stretched for months, locking rivers and soil beneath sheets of ice. Temperatures dropped to -20 degrees, and the air itself seemed to sting. For most people, the season meant retreat, but for blacksmiths, there was no rest. Villages still needed plough blades, horseshoes, knives, and nails to survive. In this frozen world, metal behaved like a living creature. Iron grew stubborn and brittle. A single mistake in temperature could split it like ice. The blacksmith's greatest enemy was not time nor fatigue, but cold itself, a silent force that crept into his tools, his lungs, and his bones. Yet the forge could not go silent. The people of the village depended on that fire, and the blacksmith depended on it for his own warmth and survival. In the heart of winter, every strike of the hammer was a defiance of death, a rhythm of life against the stillness of frost. A blacksmith's workshop in winter was a fortress of clay and straw. Built deep within the village, it stood away from the biting wind, its thick mud walls packed tight to hold precious heat. The roof was layered with reeds and dry grass, trapping warmth like a blanket over the forge. At its centre burned a clay furnace, the heart of the house. Before dawn, the blacksmith would rise, his breath already visible in the air. He placed dry straw beneath the coals and dripped a bit of vegetable oil, whispering a small prayer before striking flint. The first spark was a ritual, the rebirth of fire after a long night of darkness. As flames rose, the forge glowed red against the dim workshop walls. It was not merely a place of work, but of survival. In that fragile warmth, the blacksmith prepared his tools, knowing that once the day began, the cold outside would not forgive a moment's hesitation. Charcoal was more than fuel. It was survival itself. In the medieval winters of northern China, every spark depended on wood burned months before. Blacksmiths preferred oak, chestnut, or willow charcoal, each carefully dried and stored since autumn. Good charcoal burned hot and clean, without smoke that could choke the forge. When the snow came, charcoal became a treasure as valuable as food. Families bartered sacks of grain or cloth for a few bundles of blackened wood. Without it, the forge was nothing but a frozen pit of clay. A day without fire meant a day without work, and perhaps without warmth. Blacksmiths learned to ration their flames. They tended the coals as if they were alive, feeding them gently, keeping them glowing through the longest nights. Even a single ember hidden under ash was guarded like gold. From that ember, life could begin again in the morning. The smell of burning charcoal mixed with iron dust filled the air, harsh, earthy, familiar. It was the scent of survival. And in that dim red glow, a man could feel his own pulse mirrored in the breathing of the fire. The winter forge was simple but ingenious. Built of hardened clay, its mouth sat low to the ground to trap heat and resist the biting wind. A small opening fed air from the bellows, a wooden and oxhide contraption that exhaled life into the coals. Each tool had its place, arranged near the fire so the frost would not seize them. Iron hammers, steel tongs, and a stone anvil all waited beside the glowing pit. Before each use, the blacksmith warmed them carefully, for cold metal could crack or slip from the hand. Every breath from the bellows sent a soft roar through the forge. Sparks leapt like fireflies in the gloom, dancing across the soot-black walls. It was a world of rhythm. Push, strike, turn, breathe. In this space of smoke and flame, the forge became more than a workshop. It was a living heart, one that beat in harmony with the blacksmith's own. Each hiss of air, each clang of metal was a heartbeat of defiance against the winter beyond those walls. A blacksmith's fight against the cold was not just with fire, it was with the body itself. Layers of thick cotton coats wrapped his frame, tied tight with hemp cords. Around his wrists and arms he wound strips of linen to seal in what little warmth he had. Yet even so, his hands were bare. No gloves could come between his skin and the hammer. He needed to feel the weight, the vibration, the subtle shift in the metal's mood. Frostbite was a constant risk, but numb fingers could not forge a blade. Every movement was a balance between precision and pain. Near his feet, a small clay basin called huopen burned with quiet coals. Its soft glow warmed the toes, barely enough to keep circulation alive. Between strikes, he would hover his hands above it for a moment, just long enough to feel the ache fade before returning to work. The cold was relentless, slipping through every seam. But blacksmiths learned endurance not from comfort, but from repetition. Sweat froze on their collars, breath hung heavy in the air, and yet they swung again. To forge was to suffer, and to keep going anyway. In winter, the forge became a dance of heat and time. Metal was heated until it glowed, first dark red, then orange, then nearly white. The blacksmith watched the colours with a scholar's eye, knowing that a heartbeat too long or too short would ruin the steel. He lifted the glowing piece with iron tongs and laid it on the anvil. The hammer fell again and again, steady, purposeful, like the beating of a drum. Each strike shaped the metal's destiny. As he worked, the forge hissed and crackled, sending bursts of warmth into the freezing air. When the metal began to dull, he turned it quickly, thrusting it back into the fire. The rhythm never broke. Bellows, hammer, rotate, quench. A bucket of water stood nearby, but in winter even water turned against him. The surface froze between uses, forming a thin layer of ice that had to be broken each time. Steam rose when the hot steel met the cold water, drifting upward like ghosts in the dim light. For a moment, the workshop disappeared into mist, the meeting of two worlds, fire and frost, life and endurance. Water was both a friend and a threat in the forge. It cooled the steel, hardened it, gave it strength, yet if too cold it could shatter everything. In the dead of winter, blacksmiths never used pure ice water. They kept buckets near the fire, mixing in salt or ash to temper the chill. They had no thermometers, only instinct. A hiss that was too sharp, a colour that faded too fast. These were warnings. Too hot and the steel will break, too cold and it will die, they would say. To forge was to read the elements like scripture. Each quenching released a burst of white steam, swirling upward into the rafters. The scent of hot iron and water mingled into something ancient and holy. Every drop hissed with a life of its own, as if the steel screamed and was reborn in the same breath. The blacksmith's world was built on these fragile balances. Fire that must not burn too fiercely, water that must not freeze too deep. Between them lay survival, between them lay art. In every blade or ploughshare there lived a story of heat meeting cold, and of a man standing between both, unbroken. Winter had its own music inside the forge. Before dawn, when the village still slept under its blanket of snow, the first strikes of the hammer rang out, slow, deliberate, echoing through the frosted air. Each blow was a note, each spark a fleeting light in the darkness. The rhythm of the blacksmith's work became the rhythm of the village's heart. Farmers heard it and knew life continued. Children woke to it like a morning bell. The sounds were layered. The crack of the hammer, the low roar of the fire, the wheeze of the bellows. Together they formed a kind of prayer, repeated endlessly until it became second nature. Sometimes, when the cold wind blew through a gap in the wall, the forge flame flickered and the tone changed, a reminder that nature still ruled. But the blacksmith never stopped. He moved with patience, almost grace. His motions tuned to a music only he could hear. Outside, snow fell silently. Inside, sparks burst and vanished, painting the walls red and gold. In that contrast, between silence and noise, frost and flame, the essence of the medieval forge lived on. Before the forge was ever lit, the blacksmith would bow to the spirit of fire. In ancient Chinese belief, the forge was not merely a tool, it was sacred. They called upon Huode Chengjun, the god of fire and virtue, protector of artisans and metal. On the first day of the new year, offerings were placed near the furnace. Incense, a bowl of rice wine, a few pieces of dried fruit. The blacksmith whispered for steady flames and strong iron, for safety, and for his hammer to never falter. To outsiders this might have looked like superstition, but to those who lived by the forge, it was faith in its purest form, a dialogue between man and element. Fire could destroy as easily as it could create. To control it was to walk a line between reverence and mastery. When the first spark caught, silence fell. It was said that a forge blessed with the right spirit would burn evenly, hum softly and never spit angrily. The blacksmiths trusted that rhythm. They worked not against the fire but with it, treating every coal as if it were alive. In the glow of the forge their faces shone red, half human, half divine. The forge became a shrine, and each strike of the hammer a prayer. In the endless winters of the medieval world, Chinese blacksmiths did more than forge iron. They forged resilience. Every spark was a vow to endure, every breath of smoke a reminder of the body's fragile warmth. From the frozen plains of northern China to the mountain valleys of the west, blacksmiths everywhere shared this same struggle, to keep fire alive when the world turned to ice. Their work was not glorious. It left burns, blisters and scars that outlasted the weapons and tools they made. Yet those marks were proof of something timeless, that humanity's strength has always been born from hardship. Even now, when we hold a simple nail or blade, we touch the legacy of those who once laboured in the cold. They stood between frost and flame, between despair and persistence, and kept the light alive for all who followed. In the heart of winter, their forges became the beating hearts of civilization, small glowing sanctuaries where human will refused to die.